Okay, let's talk to telecommunications expert Tholoana Ncheke. Thank you for being with us. So let's start with, where is the line between protest action or protest tweets and social media posts or tweets that are an incitement to violence? I hope you can make it easy for us to distinguish between those two.
Thank you very much. Good evening, and thank you very much for having me on your show. So it's very interesting that you should pose the question around how do we actually identify what is and is not permissible, particularly in the climate that we find ourselves in. South Africa being a constitutional democracy, it always has the first point of departure. We want to identify the rights we have as well as the limitations to those rights. And quite importantly, when we're talking, that we then have to consider is the right to freedom of expression. And we know that it's often been cited by various public figures whenever, there's quite a few happening. And particularly if we look at Section 16 of the Constitution, it provides for the right to freedom of expression. And of course, it extends to some of the engagements that we have online. But quite importantly, what we need to understand is this right is not without its limitation. We have the right to freedom of expression. It also indicates that we do not, however, have the right to, have any sort of incitement for imminent violence, propaganda for war. That type of expression is actually not permitted. And of course, we have other pieces of legislation that have gone on to articulate issues pertaining to incitement of violence. We've got the Criminal Procedure Act, we've got the Film and Publication Act, both the Principal Act and the Amendment Act of 2019, and we also have the Cybercrimes Act of 2020. The last two pieces of legislation are yet to actually be enacted, but at least it does give us an indication of the intention of the legislature and government to actually ensure that we do understand that some of this type of engagement can actually attract a criminal liability, which would result in either a criminal sanction through a fine or imprisonment. And of course, we need to then contextualize within those particular parameters.
All right, we'll look at some specific examples, but I mean, people tonight involved in looting, say, if they are tweeting, let's rendezvous here and loot or burn, I guess that's a clear-cut case where they are then implicated in a criminal act.
Absolutely. And what we need to also understand is when we're talking about particularly criminal acts, including incitement of violence, as articulated in the Criminal Procedure Act, we need to understand that there are various elements of the crime that will have to be proven. And when we are talking about incitement for either imminent violence as articulated in the Constitution or just incitement of violence as we've got it in the other pieces of legislation, we need to then consider the intention of the individual that is circulating some of these tweets. And the reason I mention intention is because a lot of the times the defense would be, no, I was perhaps just wanting to engage in the discussion of the day. I wanted to be part of the narrative. But what people have to appreciate is if there is a reasonable possibility that your actions could actually constitute incitement, and you, notwithstanding the fact that you have that foresight, do continue to tweet or post or whatever the case may be, you could still actually be found to be liable for the sanction insofar as incitement of violence is concerned. And so that is why it's very important for us to exercise the right that we have.
Ms. Ncheke, so we are running out of time. I was saying, even if you pass something on. But before we let you go, I just want to look at a specific example, because there are grey areas. So the police minister confirmed that the daughter of former President Jacob Zuma is being investigated for incitement. If you look at her tweets, there have been threats saying, release my father, law and order can only be restored if my father is released. She did speak about the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, as sort of head of the white monopoly capitalists. That's perhaps defamation, but is all of this incitement? It's pretty hard unless somebody says, let's go out and loot and see people killed, etc.
Absolutely, and that's why the courts are often leaned upon to assist us in interpreting. But we need to, the point that I want to emphasize is we need to be very considered when it comes to even just sharing the tweet, is you need to understand what the context is and what the message is, because once you have communicated and once you have tweeted, if certain people are going to construe your engagements in a particular manner, you may actually be liable for a criminal sanction. Because when we are talking about the intention to incite, we are not only talking about the direct intention, but the reasonable possibility that your tweet or post could actually incite harm. And that would actually fall within the category of intention for the purposes of incitement. And so it's very important for us to be considered when it comes to how we engage online, be it on social media platforms or even amongst each other as peers using peer-to-peer networks. Because at the end of the day, each and every aspect of our engagements online would be assessed against the particular crime. And of course, the crimes are defined in the various pieces of legislation that I have just cited. And so in as much as I wouldn't want to give a direct answer that is definitely incitement, we have to be responsible, taking into context the climate that the country finds itself in, and a lot of what has transpired over the last few days.
All right, so the courts would look at the context, how emotions are running high in this specific context. Thank you very much. That was media and telecommunications expert Tholoana Ncheke.